Jay-Z is looking for someone who can do X, Y, and Z and has an interest in A, B, and C. Do you know anyone who might be interested?
Samyr Laine. Samyr has one of the most diverse resumes that bounces around sports and entertainment. What led you to founding your old VC firm, Freedom Trail Capital?
I haven't achieved my maximum potential. I haven't tapped out yet.
The first Olympian I've had on the show. But why did you leave?
Jay was in the room, right? Like to meet with the CEO and the CFO and the CMO about partnering on something, an idea that he had.
What was like the impetus?
Like Mr. Beast was like, I edit all of my YouTube videos with this AI thing.
You had all this going. You had a league that was growing, right? Why leave? Hello, I'm your host, Mike Gelb, and this is the Consumer VC Podcast brought to you by Propeller Industries, the leading strategic finance and accounting partner for venture stage companies. On this show, we discuss the intersection of venture capital and consumer innovation. If you're enjoying this show, please subscribe on YouTube or whichever platform you're viewing this content. And if you want the full experience, highly recommend checking out the newsletter at theconsumervc.com, where I share weekly updates of all the fundraising news that's happening in the world of consumer, and you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. All content and episodes are for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not investment advice. Thank you, Sarah McGuire, for the intro to our guest today, Samyr Laine. Samyr has one of the most diverse resumes that bounces around sports and entertainment. He was an Olympian who trained and qualified while being a full-time law student. He worked for the Washington Wizards, Washington Capitals, MLS, Jay-Z, Will Smith, and is now the founder and general partner of Freedom Trail Capital. There's quite a few themes in this episode. One I was particularly interested in learning from Samyr was the intersection of talent, celebrity, and consumer brands. What makes, for example, an ideal partnership between brand and talent? I really love this one. Samyr, thanks again for coming on. Without further ado, here's Samyr. Samyr, thank you so much for joining me here today. How are you?
Doing well. Can't complain. It's a little cool in supposedly sunny Southern California, but I'm doing well.
I know, cool and rainy, right? I mean,
Yes.
I guess this is like the first day that we've had in a little bit with some sunshine. But anyway, yeah, it has been pretty cool. I want to start out just asking, where does kind of like your drive come from? Because you know, when we last spoke, and of course, like as we've like gotten to know each other, was pretty remarkable about your journey. And of course, we're going to go through the entire the entireness of your journey and where you are now with your VC fund. But you were in law school full time. I have friends that went through law school, and holy shit, it's like freaking hard. And it's a lot of work. And it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work. And you were also like flying around the world competing in trying to qualify for the Olympics, and eventually you did and become an Olympian. Where did that kind of, when you're kind of living like almost like a double life in that, you know, you're kind of in law school and then also competing to become an Olympian, where did that kind of drive for you kind of stem from?
Yeah. I think it's twofold, right? I think at some point for me, I was intent, and I still am, and always have been, intent on just seeing how deep the rabbit hole goes, right? Making sure that I can get as much out of my skill level, my talent, the efforts I put in as possible. And so when I got to law school, of course, was an athlete in college. I had an extra season of eligibility because I had an injury my senior year. So I went to the University of Texas. I used my last season of collegiate eligibility there. When I finished there, I still felt as if I was improving and getting better as an athlete, in particular in the triple jump, which is my event. And so when I got to law school, it was kind of like, I haven't achieved my maximum potential. I haven't tapped out yet. So let me see if I can't go ahead and like continue competing and try and like maximize everything I can get out of this, you know? And so a part of it was just trying to make sure that as long as I was continuing to learn and grow and develop and improve, I wanted to keep doing that, right? Like I'm always down to like keep growing. And then the other part of it is I've got two parents who came to the States from Haiti, and always understanding, like, you know, family wise, I have two younger brothers, so setting an example for them, but then looking at the example my parents and my family set for me, as most like first generation parents say, that's always a big deal. But a lot of it that morphed into this concept of like, I'm still learning, I'm still growing. I've got to like learn as much as I can and grow as much as I can in whatever it is, right? It might be the triple jump, it might be something else.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really appreciate that and just find it like so impressive that you were kind of doing both things
Yeah, I don't
at
advise it
once.
though. I never advise like when I tell people like if you're in law school, just focus on law school. It's one of the things that I always am like just don't worry about other stuff. Like there'll be time for that. But time is of the essence.
When did you know on the athlete triple jump side that you thought that you hey, I might be one of the best in the world at this, and it's actually worth kind of pursuing, kind of above like the collegiate, sector.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? As I said, there are levels to this, right? So, like in college, I was an NCAA All American my junior year, and I had won conference, and I set the conference record and the school record. But then when I got to the University of Texas for my extra season of eligibility, I was like, oh, this is kind of a step up. Like when I went to nationals, it's like this is a step up from what I'm used to competing in. And then even from there, of course, like doing it internationally, professionally, it's several steps up at that point, right? And so what I realized was after I got my master's degree at Texas, I went and I spoke to the Haitian national team because both my parents are from there again. And I went down to the Pan American Games in Rio de Janeiro, which is my first international competition. And just seeing, the level people were competing at, the rate at which I was improving, where I was nowhere near ready to like actually stand alongside people competing internationally from, and it's the Pan American Games, right? So it's a huge, huge international competition. So I wasn't necessarily ready to stand on my own, but being there and seeing, again, in the triple jump, how far other people were jumping, how fast they were, how big they were. At some point, that exposure helped me to realize, like, I'm not as far away as it might seem. Thankfully, in the triple jump, like you measure in centimeters internationally, right? So I could see, like, all right, if I can improve this much, I can qualify. I can like meet the minimum qualifying standard for the 2008 Olympics because I went to the 2007 Pan American Games in Rio. So, it was in between my master's degree in law school when I went to the Pan Am Games, and I was like, I think I can do this. And then I also saw like what the international standard was to qualify for a world championship, to qualify for an Olympic Games, and what that took. And then at that point, I was like, if I jump my best, I'm not that far off. If I can improve and consistently be at or near what is now my best and improve like my upper limit, I can actually like make a go of it, right? And so, of course, again, doing it while balancing law school, you're probably not improving at the rate you want to improve at. But after my first year of law school, I competed that summer. I missed qualifying for the Beijing Olympics by, like a few inches, maybe several inches, which again, in the grand scheme of things, especially in triple jump, isn't that far off. And then after my second year of law school, I'd improved enough to be top 10 in the world. I think I was number 7 in the world, right? And so, and that enabled me to qualify for the 2009 World Championships in Berlin. And yeah, I like, it was really like that first experience in 2007 in Rio where I was like, I think I'm close, but then just working diligently, right? Like in spite of torts class or criminal law or anything like that, working diligently to improve and just understanding the weaknesses that I had as an athlete meant that I could actually improve my performance to the place where I could qualify for an Olympics or world championships or compete alongside the world's best.
What was it like in 2012 London game? If we can get some like behind the scenes, what it's like to like actually like be an Olympian there.
Yeah, it was surreal for starters. A part of it is just because you've got 8,000 to 10,000 athletes from around the world, all at the best of whatever sport they compete in, and so being in that in that environment, it is electric, like people say, but also like walking through the stadium for the opening ceremonies is as surreal and dreamlike as people envision it to be. Like you grow up watching the Olympics, you're like, dang, that's probably so cool. It is that and then some. And so, but then like, in between, like the McDonald's is a huge sponsor at the Olympic Games, believe it or not. And they have like a McDonald's inside the Olympic Village. But to be, in between sessions or competitions and you're in line at the McDonald's behind a Kobe Bryant or Russell Westbrook or something like that, who here, you know what I mean? But because it's the Olympics, everyone is an Olympian. Everyone stands shoulder to shoulder. Everyone is among the best of their particular sport. That was pretty cool to see too, right? And so it's one of those things where unforgettable experience to have my family there, I trained with my now wife, so she was there. She also competed in that Olympic Games as well. So both like to have everyone there to experience that with family, with friends. Some of my closest friends came there. But yeah, man, like especially in London, and so I've competed around the world, but to be in a place like London, and for me, it helped because it was an English speaking country, right? And so we could go out into the city and just experience it and just feel the vibe, the electric vibe that the Olympics brought to all of London, and not like be like sheltered in place in the Olympic Village, which a lot of times folks are. And so to experience the entire city, just having that buzz, and then in the stadium to compete in the stadium filled like all of it. Every time I think about it, you're like, man, that was once in a lifetime experience. Is an understatement, but definitely unforgettable. And also it made all the sacrifice worthwhile. It made at that time I told the law firm that I was supposed to work at that I wasn't going to be coming. It made that decision worthwhile. So a little bit of vindication as well too.
I'd imagine they were probably the first law firm to be turned down because, hey, I'm actually going to the Olympics, right?
Yeah, I imagine they are. They're among the first, and they understood too, because I spent the summer working there in between my second and third year of law school, and so I would train before heading down to the city to work there. And then I think I went to one competition, and I had a few of like the associates and lawyers at the firm come to watch me compete in New York City. So, in that time, and I had a year gap between law school and when I was supposed to start at the firm. And so in that time, I let them know, like, I'm not coming. They understood and appreciated it, to be honest.
So, besides, obviously you were training, you were competing on the triple jump, and obviously in the Olympics, and everything during that period. At the same time, like we've said, you were in law school. You were obviously going to go work at a big firm. But why did you decide to go to law school? What was your thinking when it came to what you wanted your career to entail? Because there is like an interesting thread, at least in like the first part of your career, which it's like mending law and a bit of law, and then also like sports. But was that kind of like the intention in terms of like you're actually mending like your passion area, it seemed, in sports? Or obviously you were and being wanted to be involved in like that side of the business, but thinking what are the ways actually to do that?
Yep. Yeah. No, it's funny. That was like precisely my goal all along, right? And so in going to law school, part of it was like I was always attracted to the law, and also I have again two parents who emigrated to the U.S., right? So at some point, it's like you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, or maybe you're an accountant, right? And so I didn't want to be a doctor or accounting, so I was like, I'm going to law school. But then on top of that, the goal for me was always, if I'm going to law school, I also want to marry it with something I actually like doing, or I'm passionate about, or I'm knowledgeable about. And so even, to be honest, when I looked for law firms that I was going to spend my summers at, I worked only specifically, and I looked for and sent my resume only to firms that had sports teams or sports divisions or did sports law. And so even though like you learn in law school, like there's no such thing as sports law, it's corporate law that happens to have sports clients. You like, but like going to law school, like I want to do sports law, and you're like it's criminal law, but going to these firms, I wanted to make sure I actually got to work with sports clients or on sports matters, and so that was always the goal. And so to your point, in going to law school is like I'm going to go from here, I'm going to take my knowledge, I'm going to work at a league or team or at a firm that had sports clients. But the goal absolutely was, and exactly like I said, it was like, if I'm going to law school, I do want to do work that I'm passionate about or excited about, especially if I'm going to put in the hours anyways at a firm. I want to make sure I'm actually like enthused about the work that I'm doing and the time I'm spending doing it.
How'd you wind up at Monumental Sports? As you know, huge fan of Monumental Sports, because I grew up in the DC area. I'm a massive Capitals fan. I still need to talk to them about why they're moving the Capitals and Wizards to Alexandria, Virginia. But
I'll tell. I got when we're not recording, I've got some insights there. I might be able to share.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. But how'd you wind up there and working for that group?
Yeah. So goal was like at the tail end of my athletic career, I was just looking for ways to kind of make my transition as seamless as possible. I think a lot of times, look, I wasn't an NBA player, wasn't making NBA money anywhere near it, not even a fraction of it. But that's in general, like when your identity is so tied up in being an athlete or whatever it is, a lot of times people struggle with that transition. I think for me, it was easier because I'd gone to law school. I always knew what the long-term vision was, and then transition from that into, into athletics and then back into my professional career. But I still wanted to make sure, like, as I was like moving away from sport, that I had something to go into, right? And so I had I'd spoken at a sports forum in Haiti. We had like a sports development forum in Haiti, and met someone there who had crossed paths with Monumental Sports, and in particular with Ted Leonsis before. And so spoke to Ted about my objectives of working in sport, spoke to Ted about my background. Ted also loves everything Georgetown, thankfully. And I'd gone to Georgetown for law school. Yep. And then they also, on the legal side, had a very, 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 very lean legal team and needed some help in a very particular area. And so it was more serendipitous than anything, right? It was someone who has a passion for helping people in Ted, and someone who made that introduction. But then I think the timing just worked out perfectly, right? Because they needed someone who could do legal/legislative affairs work, right? Sit at the intersection of DC, the city council, Capitol Hill, and the Monumental Sports teams. And so I spent a lot of time, maybe you call it lobbying, but doing some legal work, but sitting at the intersection and helping to make sure that initiatives around city council that would affect or impact the team in some way or another could either go through as seamlessly as possible, or at least were heard, and managing that relationship, right? But I'd say a lot of it is some of it is luck. Some of it is making sure that people understood, like, I could add value in a very particular way. And then the timing was a big help too. But yeah, it just so happened that someone introduced me to Ted. Ted was willing to meet, and they introduced me to his general counsel, Randy Bowe. And Randy was like, you know what, I think we got some help. Like we could use you. And so I started part-time, right? Like as I was still traveling, training, competing. And these were in the latter days of my athletic career, and then doing double duty once again, as almost as I did in law school.
Wow, that's awesome. That's really cool, and also like appreciate also kind of like mention a little bit about your role there at Monumental Sports. What made you decide, and how did that your next opportunity come about with working at the MLS?
Yeah. So played soccer growing up. Always been a soccer slash football fan, and so that was also timing, right? They had someone in a role, and it was a quasi legal role as well. That person was leaving to join one of the Major League Soccer teams. And I was also looking for like a more robust position, like a more of a full-time role. Because when I was doing at Monumental was the double duty of like training, traveling, competing, and my Monumental work, right? And so I wanted to actually dive into something that allowed me to no longer compete, sink my teeth fully into this sports role. And it really was just timing, right? Like they had a role that had opened up. They had a need for someone who had a legal background, because what I was doing there was tangential to like the player contracts that the players have with the league. And so it ended up being that, I interviewed there, Major League Baseball, the NBA. I interviewed a few places, right? Because at this point in time, I wasn't competing anymore, wasn't training or traveling. My family was in New York. Again, as we said, when I went to law school, I was like, I'm going to be in the sports world. I'll probably go to a league. Maybe I'll go to a team. Monumental at the time didn't have a need for me to take on like a much larger role. And so I said, great, like I'm a free agent now. I'll go somewhere. And so, I was deciding between Major League Soccer, Major League Baseball, and the NBA. I had a former a classmate of mine who was at Major League Soccer. And I could also see the vision of what the league, what it had, the path it taken and where it was going. And so the role itself also allowed me to be close to the athletes, right? Like I did player relations and competition, which meant I was close to the players. I did player contracts, player agreements. I worked with the players union. I served on a couple committees, like the medical committee there. And so I got to be close to sports. I got to be in a growing league and a growing sports in the U.S. I kind of got to be at the forefront of this new resurgence of soccer in the States as well. And so, yeah, a lot of it was timing, but it really was like at that point in time, I was like, I want to like really dive into the sports world. I want a bigger role. Let me go up to New York and check out all the leagues and see which one has the best role. And this one was less legal than the others I was looking at, and also allowed me to be closer to the sport than I think the NBA and the MLB roles that I was looking at.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting time in the MLS, I'd imagine. Back when you worked there, I mean, even now, it's such an interesting time in terms of how the sport has grown. Obviously, like the stars that have been able to even come across and be part of it, and as well as some of like the very creative kind of contracts that they've worked out through with some of the stars. I think from like a legal perspective, that must have been pretty fascinating.
Yeah, no, it was. And so when I was there, that Zlatan Ibrahimovic had come over, so I got to help with his deal and a few others, right? So Zlatan coming over, similar to Messi, not the same caliber of player, but Zlatan's coming over, what was a big deal. And then also on the competition side, I got to see behind the curtains of like how the MLS made its rules, how they did deals with the players, how they brought and wooed some of these players over. And we're also expanding the league at that time too. So Nashville came in when I was there, Cincinnati, maybe one or two other teams came into the league while Atlanta. This was Atlanta's first year in the league while I was there too. So exciting times, even more exciting times ahead. Of course, now with Messi here and a few other players coming. So yeah, it was really, really cool.
I remember Zlatan's ad in the LA Times when he came.
Yeah,
when he took out like a whole page and he just said it says "Dear Los Angeles, you're welcome." Like just like unreal.
Yeah, the most Zlatan moment ever. But it was big for the league. It was big for LA. And I remember like being there at his first match for the Galaxy and having him score 2 goals and the way he scored.
I remember that. And like off the bench, he came off the bench against LAFC. I remember that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that was really, really amazing. But yeah, great times. And then to your point, I was working in sports. So I was like, all right, I'm good. I am happy. I'm here. I made it. Like I can stay, I can grow in this league, which is also growing.
Yeah.
I got a role that I love. I had a team that was great. I had like everyone at Major League Soccer was really, really amazing. So yeah, it was good times. It was really good times.
But why did you leave? So you had all this, you had all this going. You had a league that was growing, right? It was there's a lot of, I mean, even just thinking about it from like a brand perspective. Like I remember one kind of beverage expert telling me how like the rise of Celsius, for example, the energy drink, and like they actually lashed on themselves from MLS like when like a decade ago, and like that was part of the reason why they probably not the only reason, but like what an incredible league to be a part of during that kind of growth spurt that I'm sure was like a lot cheaper to do than the NFL and maybe NBA and what have you. And so just saying that like so many have like latched on and MLS has really like helped like drive some brands, and obviously because MLS has just grown so much in the past couple decades. Why leave?
Yeah, it's funny. I think a really smart recruiter who had some foresight sent me an email, and they were kind of like, what the email said essentially. I think I probably still have it somewhere. It was like, Jay-Z is looking for someone who can do X, Y, and Z and has an interest in A, B, and C. Do you know anyone who might be interested, or would you be interested, right? And so, I'm guessing that's a recruiter tactic, right? Like, do you know anyone who's interested? And I was like, if this is a real email, I might be interested, right? And so that led to like me making the difficult decision, especially like because I was happy at Major League Soccer, but left for a lot more money, right? So part of it is ambition, but then the other piece of it was like just the idea of at that point in time, like what Jay meant and does mean to the culture, the opportunity to do work, especially the sort of work that I was going to be doing there was once in life, and to have an impact on the culture at large, to work with a Black entrepreneur like that who's created what he's created. That there was an allure there, right? And that's what I told the folks at MLS. Like, man, I love it here. I'm happy here, but this is an opportunity. It's tough to say no to this opportunity, and especially like what it became during my time there too. And so, like I said, it was a smart recruiter. Who just happened to, especially because my background, I hadn't done anything like the work that I eventually ended up doing at Rock Nation. So yeah, I got one of these days I got to talk to that recruiter. Like, so how'd you know, like what in my profile said to reach out to me? But yeah, no, I was wooed away. by both a recruiter and by the Rock Nation label, and by Jay-Z's allure as well.
And it's, I mean, as you say, like it's kind of seems like very, very different in terms of like your previous roles at like, working for Monumental Sports, which obviously, with working with the Wizards, the Capitals, and obviously Georgetown with Georgetown's some of their games going being played at the Verizon Center. And then of course, with MLS working for a league, this is like a transition into um, I mean, still obviously sports is part of it, right? Because they also have like their own sports agency. But can you tell me a little bit about how Rock Nation is kind of structured? I know it's a JV between Rockefeller Records, Jay-Z's label, right? And then also like Live Nation. If you can but would love to kind of learn more about a bit of the history. How did that kind of come about, and overall like how like the decision making kind of happens?
Yeah. So it's so what I will say, it's Jay-Z in signing his deal with Live Nation. As part of that was to do a joint venture that ended up becoming Rock Nation. So I'd say it's more Jay-Z personally than Rockefeller Records, because Rockefeller eventually, like, Rockefeller was like a previous entity, but this was like the reimagination of it, right? And so reimagining of it.
So it
So
almost like tied it to it. It kind of was like the evolution of Rockefeller.
exactly, it's the evolution. It's new business partners, new ambitions, and so on and so forth. And so Jay and his deal with Live Nation included, hey, like let's create a joint venture that became Rock Nation. Rock Nation is one part management, one part record label / publishing, and then also you've got sports, and then you got a few other things as well. Like I'd say there are events. There's a venture arm to Rock Nation, but it is it's a conglomerate to some extent, right? Whereas, and also Jay's businesses are separate from Rock Nation itself, right? So it's not like Jay's cognac or champagne or any of those things sits under Rock Nation. Rock Nation is artist management, record label, publishing, venture arm, and then sports, of course, and then you've got some events, right? There's a music festival and so on, and then of course Jay as chairman, but you had a proper executive team, right? You had your sports executives across football, baseball, basketball, and so on. When I was there was also a TV and film division, growing TV and film division. You had CEO who's based out here in LA. You had a COO who was based in New York, around the New York office. So you got two offices. And then you had a whole slew of amazing artists, both on the management side and on the label side. And so Jay, of course, it's his company, but he has multiple co-founders. I think 3 or 4 other co-founders, and they ended up some of them serve in like day-to-day roles, and others just serve in the board capacity. But it ended up being, for me, a great experience. But from a decision making, it's run at that board and executive level, almost like you would any other agency or management company or corporate enterprise.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I also understand too, like in terms of like the cognac and like maybe like consumer goods. So that's kind of outside Rock Nation. If that is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And so what happened was I worked directly for Desiree Perez, who was at that time Chief Operating Officer, who is now CEO of Rock Nation. She also works very closely with Jay and all of his businesses. And so in my working with Desiree, I got to do all the Rock Nation stuff as Senior Director of Operations, and then also help when and where needed on anything Desiree and Jay were involved in, which is separately, right? So Jay's separate enterprise and business entity is where, you've got Tidal, the streaming platform, you've got Douce, the cognac, Armand de Brignac, the champagne. While I was there, I launched a book publishing division that was part of Rock Nation. And then on the flip side, you also had a cannabis business that was part of Jay's enterprise, right? So I kind of got to sit in the middle of the Rock Nation and the Jay-Z businesses, and like get a not just a bird's eye view of it all, but a ground floor view of it all as well.
This episode is brought to you by Propeller Industries. If you run a high growth business and you're focused on profitability, extending your runway, and improving your operational efficiency, you probably need a finance and accounting whiz that will grow with you. Well, instead of hiring someone full time, what would be cost effective is working with Propeller Industries. Propeller Industries is a leading strategic finance and accounting partner for venture stage companies and has partnered with over 1,000 startups and high growth businesses across consumer products, consumer tech, and enterprise. Some of the brands that they've worked with are Liquid Death, Olipop, Hims, Farmer's Dog, Away, Movie Pass, and Giphy. Propeller also provides specialized support for fundraising and M&A with transaction advisory services. Propeller's TA team of former investment bankers and investors can step in on more of a project basis when pursuing full-scale financing and M&A. There's a link to Propeller Industries in the show notes if you want to learn more information. Well, what was your role and how did you spend your time? If you're kind of balancing between Jay-Z's like consumer businesses, Monogram, Title, and everything versus the Rock Nation, which is as you say, like you like started a publishing company, and then as well as you have the management, you have the label, you have of course like the venture arm and events business. Like how was your, did you lean more so on like the consumer goods side and the actual like inventory based businesses, or did you lean more towards on like the service provider kind of business with like the agency side and like the management, that sort of thing?
It's a good question. So my title was Senior Director of Operations, which really meant Jack of all trades, master of some. I wouldn't say master of none. There's some stuff I was decent at. And I spent my time putting out fires is what I tell people. But in terms of like division of time, it was probably, I'd say 50-50, right? And so 50%, and a lot of that is because like Desiree herself as CEO just has like so much on her plate, right? Like run Rock Nation, run Jay-Z Empire, which is its own like huge conglomerate. And so I went anywhere and everywhere that I was needed at any time. It meant very, 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 very little sleep. But also like on the Rock Nation side, I could do anything from redo the employee handbook with legal counsel, spin up an internship program. We opened 2 new offices while I was there, so help oversee the office construction project. I also worked very closely with a handful of art. I got a platinum plaque out of it, which I never would have imagined, especially going to law school where I'm going for sports. I never would have imagined getting a platinum plaque working with Meek Mill. But part of it was like at some point, Desiree, there were some artists that Desiree also counsels very closely. And so I got to a place where if Desiree wasn't available, I'm the next best thing, right? So I'm in the studio with Meek Mill. I'm at a concert with Yo Gotti. I'm in a meeting with Lil Uzi Vert or with Alicia Keys. And so at Rock Nation, I got to do everything operationally. I got to do a little bit of management. I got to help oversee the Made America Music Festival because that's operations as well. So there were times where I'm in a meeting with the City Council of Philadelphia or the mayor of Philadelphia because, if Des can't be there, again, I'm the next best thing. And we've got this festival that requires a ton of planning. And then on top of that, the other 50% is everything Jay was doing that Desiree has purview over, right? So there were times where she's like, I can't be there, you got to be there. Or I don't have the time to be there, so you got to be there. So I might take a day trip to France to check out the inventory on the champagne, or I might meet with the JV business partners in Miami for a few hours, and I'm all over the place. But I'd say it was probably 50-50 in terms of the consumer stuff that needed help. And again, like Des and Jay are the final arbiters, but I'm there like in the weeds, helping to see what needs to happen and helping to at least advise on decisions before they make their decisions. And then the other 50% was everything Rock Nation. And everything Rock Nation, like I said, could be ops, it could be management, it could be HR work, it could be legal work, and everything in between. So.
I appreciate that, kind of like demonstrating on both sides what kind of the day-to-day responsibilities are, which it seems like it's kind of all encompassing, and like there's just it's just as you say, like it seems like 50-50 in terms of how your time was spent between Jay-Z stuff and then also Rock Nation.
Yeah, and no 2 days were the same, right? Like I think my first day there, I got a stack of printed out emails, and the assignment, it was kind of like, Jay wants to start a book publishing division. Go figure out how to do it, right? So I spent several months figuring out how to spin up a JV. We ended up doing a JV with Penguin Random House to launch what became Rock Lit 101, and now has since published books from Rich Paul and Cece Sabathia and a few other people. But it was like, Jay wants to do it, go figure out how to make it happen. Versus like on the flip side, worked very closely with Meek Mill, and he had a docuseries come out on Amazon, right? So I'm working with Amazon around what does the deal look like and how does it have to be structured and what are you trying to film? And now we're following Meek on trying to film and capture all that stuff. And then the next day I could be in Miami for a quarterly board review meeting of Douce. And we're talking to Bacardi about how much liquid we have and are there shortages and how we fix the shortages, how much marketing dollars should be put in. So like literally no 2 days were the same. But on top of that, it was here, there, and everywhere. But it was like a tremendous learning experience as a result.
Why did Jay-Z want to start a book publishing division?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was it's the same reason he has Roc Nation as a whole and Tidal and so on and so forth, was to give a platform for artists to tell their stories in an unfiltered, unadulterated way. And also to be artists first, right? There's a reason that Tidal, even to this day, spins out the most royalties for artists versus any other platform. It's not even close. And so from the book publishing standpoint, it's why like Rich Paul can choose to publish his book on Rocklet 101 or CC Sabathia or anyone to that effect, right? So the deals, I'd say, are artist friendly, but beyond that, it's not like, when it comes to like what the artist or the athlete or whoever is saying, it allows the clients of Roc Nation to have a place where they can tell their story and do so in a way where they know, like Hachette Books or Simon & Schuster, the editor at Simon & Schuster is not going to like spin their words or try to soften it or make it any particular way. It's like, this is a place where you can tell your story, whatever that story is. And also it's an outlet for folks in Roc Nation who, like, in some cases might not get book deals or might not have a platform to tell that story from a typical publisher to be able to do that. And yeah, they still have their protocols and boxes you have to check in terms of which books are published, because you still got to do good business. But it really was intended on being a platform for folks to say what they have to say. And that's always been, I think, his MO, right, is uplifting artists, athletes, entertainers, and everyone else, but allowing them to kind of own their destiny to some extent.
That makes sense. Another kind of outlet for them too. Another kind of way to kind of share your story, not just obviously through song, through music. Another art for them to do it. Another avenue. On the consumer goods side to Jay-Z, since obviously you were very involved in that. From what you've noticed and the brands that you've worked with, what do you think is kind of Jay-Z's criteria when it comes to buying a stake or getting involved with a brand?
So I think a few things. I think first is authenticity with what he stands for and with how it's going to relate or be received by the people. It's got to look and feel and be authentic to him. But in general, like whatever it is has to be authentic as a brand. And it has to connect with people in a way that isn't just about like, oh, it's got his name on it, right? No, it's got to be like a real meaningful connection. I do think the other piece is like, for him, it's not the idea of building a brand on his back or just because it has his name. Like that's never been a thing for him, right? Like put my face here and use my face to market X product. I think the other piece is understanding that the business is good business and the product is a great product, whether or not he's involved. And then aside from that, can he come aboard and add value in terms from like a creative direction standpoint, right? Like, is there a place for him to leave his imprint and leave a mark and add value creatively in a sense that, because his brand is like, it's always been aspirational. It's always been, if I can do it, you can do it too. It's always been like leaving some gems, a lot of times in his music, leaving some gems and breadcrumbs for people to follow to get to whatever their level of achievement is. And so his brands always have that like aspirational quality to it too. So for him, I know he likes leaving his imprint on whatever it is, but he also wants to make sure he's able to add value and move the needle in a meaningful way, right? So he's not going to come aboard anything unless he can actually have an impact that makes sense. But authenticity is a big piece. The quality of the product is also a tremendous piece as well, right? So the cognac has to be excellent. He was the one who's deciding what that taste is. The champagne has to be excellent, and so on and so forth. And then the last piece, like creatively, is he able to like have an impact that is meaningful and have an impact that will be culturally relevant, but also just move the needle from a business standpoint too. It's not just about attaching his name to something just for the sake of doing it. It's about what does his ethos and his involvement in a project mean. And you see it nowadays, not as much on the consumer side, like he's killed it on consumer, but even what you see, like the work he's done with some of the shows and films he's attached his name to for Netflix, right? I think The Harder They Fall was one. They had another one come out. I think for him, he's like, can this film, again, to your point, another medium, right? In this case, in one case, it was book publishing. In this case, it's film. But can this film with his name attached to it, does it have cultural cachet? Will it be authentic to the community? Does it stand for something? Does it have some sort of meaning, and so on and so forth? But he takes that same process through consumer goods that he's involved in, right? Like, is it a great product? Will it be meaningful? Is it authentic to me and to the culture? And, if my name is associated with it, are people going to like scratch their head about it, or is it going to make sense in a meaningful way? And so, I think those are some of the boxes he definitely has to check.
Is there like any like wild or fun stories that you have in terms of having Jay-Z maybe have to do something in terms of actually put for any one of his consumer brands?
Oh man, no, Jay's different. I think Jay is he's not the. I saw The Rock had like a tequila truck that they drove cross country, and he showed up for Terramana. He's like serving serving tacos out of the truck. That's
not Jay.
but like as we were putting together Monogram, the cannabis brand, we had a meeting. I think that this is years ago. This is things have since fallen apart for them, but like. I think we met with the MedMen team, the CEO team, and Jay was in the room, right? Like to meet with the CEO and the CFO and the CMO about partnering on an idea that he had, right? And so he was very present in that way where it's like, I will add heft where I need to add heft. Otherwise, I'm here for creative input, right? Like, especially like if the CEO of Bacardi is like, all right, we need to have a meeting of the minds, that's Jay's thing. Or, it's MedMen or anything like that, right? And so he was very smart about when and where he added that, utilized the leverage that he had and the star power that he had, but also always true to himself, which is again, like I know he preaches it, but I think he lives it as well. So it's not like he's going to be there like, this is my thing, go get it. I'm showing up at the liquor store, blah, blah, like a DJ Khaled, but that's also very authentic for DJ Khaled. It just isn't for Jay. So it's very different in that way.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, obviously, it's obviously very, very different for the people. I know that when I was talking to another person that was close to the Troy Aikman 8. Troy Aikman has the 8 company, and Troy was like going bar to bar in Texas and like dishing out 8, and like it was like kind of like a road show for 8 beer and stuff like that. And that was Troy obviously like love to do it and everything like that. But it's all about what's authentic to the personality and the person.
That matters just as much as anything else, right? Like if it's inauthentic, it's gonna like if Jay had be like, yo, I'm at the liquor store, go come get your people would be like, what? Like, and it also would have hurt the mystique that he has and his brands have. And that's part of what works for him. It's part of what makes what he's done so far so successful.
What have you learned? Because obviously Jay-Z has also sold, a few of his business, obviously has done extremely well from it overall. What have you learned as an observer in terms of when is the right time to sell through like that experience?
Yeah. So I think what I've learned, especially like being alongside these processes, is when you feel or or you see that there isn't any more value for you and your team to get out of it on your own. Right. And so a lot of times a strategic will come in and can plug your brand or company into their thing and take it to an entirely different level or stratosphere. And so it doesn't mean like you sell out entirely, and you might sell a portion of it. Right. But at some point you'll get a company and especially even with talent, you'll get a company to a place where it's like, we can't take it any further than we have to this point. And plugging into a larger system allows us to kind of continue this journey that we're on. That's a big piece of it. And also being transparent about where you are, where the company is, and what you're able to achieve is important as well, right? And so, that meant on our end, we had to have some hard conversations on everything, like on title, Ace of Spades, Deuce, like all of those things around like we've taken it have we taken as far as we can on our own without adding additional dollars or adding additional strategic heft or any something to that extent, right? So being transparent and being honest with yourself, sometimes taking a sober look in the mirror and appreciating the idea of like, great, like we as this small, nimble team have gotten it here. In order for us to like get truly to the next level, we need a little bit of strategic help. In order for us to go global, sometimes to go global, we need some strategic help. Let's sell a chunk or a piece or all of it. Like sometimes you just fall out of love with a thing. You're like, let someone else take it off my hands. But really like just being honest and being open about with yourself around like, have we gotten the most out of it? And if we can, or if you've gotten close to the most out of it, maybe it's time to like start finding strategic to help get it to that next level, whatever that next level might be.
Yeah, and also, I think those are great points. I think also, like what is the ambition of the company too? You know, is the ambition to just to keep it as is, which is great, and it could be like a great cash flowing business, right? And maybe you want, and maybe you never want to sell it, but is it to take it new heights? Okay, like maybe this is a really compelling offer, and so and this company, it's not like this company's going to die. Like obviously they're spending a good amount on this company, and so we wanted to see to actually release it to global heights. So it really kind of also depends as like an operator and owner, like what your ambitions are for the company. So why'd you leave? It sounded awesome. Why again? Why again did you leave Jay-Z and Rock Nation to head over to Westbrook, which is Will and Jada Pinkett Smith's company?
Yeah, you know what? I saw an opportunity to be a part of something that was a little bit earlier on than when I jumped on the train at Rock Nation, right? So Westbrook was just getting the ball rolling. They'd had ambitions of like being kind of like to have a multi-pronged approach to things, both consumer, TV, film, media, marketing, and so on. And then again, another opportunity that I couldn't refuse, right? And so I was recently married at the time, came to the West Coast, and wanted to take a stab at helping be a part of building something, right? Like Rock Nation was a well-oiled machine. I feel like I had a tremendous value there, but not as much value as I anticipated building. Like, this is a new thing. Let's help build it from the ground up. And so when I got here, I helped in an operational capacity and worked directly with the COO again at Westbrook to kind of set the foundation, get the ball rolling on things, and then slid over to oversee Westbrook's consumer product division, right? Which was even more, I don't know, like what I did at Rock Nation and with Jay was very diverse. Apparel, cannabis, books, cognac, but at Westbrook, it might have been even more so, right? Only because I also did like licensing and e-commerce. And then we incubated brands from scratch. We did coffee, personal care, we did apparel again. And so a long list of things that I was able to kind of help be a part of and steer the ship on a little bit. And so I think all of those things were what wooed me to come over, right, to be a part of building something from the ground up. That was a lot of the appeal.
Yeah, because Jay-Z's brands too, like they were all done through JVs or like a partnership with another company. Is that right? They weren't kind of like incubated, like or is that wrong there?
Most of them. So Paper Planes is wholly owned, built from scratch, the apparel brand. Armand de Brignac, the champagne Ace of Spades, wholly owned by Jay and built from scratch for the most part. Like the champagne existed, but Jay bought the entirety of it and added his special sauce to it. Douce is a joint venture with Bacardi, as everyone knows, and Monogram is a joint venture with Caliva. So you know what I mean? Like he's done it multiple ways. Exactly, multiple ways. Title was wholly owned, already existed. He purchased it, so it's kind of like an acquisition. And then a lot of that knowledge and experience is what I wanted to bring to Westbrook as well.
So talk to me a little bit about how you thought about, incubating brands. I believe Westbrook started out as like the media, like a media focused company. Why move into consumer goods? What was the opportunity and how even did you think about launching these kind of brands from the start?
I think it was two places, right? Like why consumer goods is like at some point, Disney is really a tremendous and very, very large consumer goods company, right? Because you have IP that you own that you want to monetize, right? So there was a piece of Westbrook's consumer goods ambitions that were tied to TV and film and IP in general. And also because like Will owned the Fresh Prince trademark, which he licensed to the company, which the company sub-licensed. So at some point, you're like, we have IP that we can monetize. Consumer goods is a great place to do that. That's one silo. The other piece of it is, and the other ambition was like, Will and Jada always viewed Westbrook as a platform for artists to express themselves through TV, through film, through podcasts, and then potentially through brand and consumer. And so the other piece was like incubating brands with talent was a big deal. But my thought of it, especially seeing like Jay's multiple structures, my preferred structure is find a great partner and a great partnership structure or a great legal agreement and figure out ways so that you have an operator who can run it and you as talent can do what you do best, which is, as we said earlier, supercharge whatever that brand is, right? So I'm not too fond of like, I'm buying 100% of this company, I'm going to run it myself. It's not for me. I don't think the most efficient way for talent to add value or to build or scale a company. For me, it's kind of like, is there someone who's doing it? Either you acquire the company and you kind of let that team do it and you add your special sauce to it, or you invest in the company, or if you're incubating from scratch, it's ideally is a partnership with an operator who knows how to operate that business and can do it from there. And so that's why, like, I think there were some things from a structural standpoint with the Douce partnership that could have been improved, but having Bacardi steering the ship on the cognac is the best thing, right? Like securing cognac and like that's all of that stuff is exactly what you want to happen versus, being the hero and I'm going to start my own cognac business from scratch. And so like I tell talent all the time, you don't need to start anything from scratch. You don't need to be the hero. Find a great partner who you can plug into. You do what you do well, they do what they do well, and everyone can kind of ride off into the sunset,
No, totally, and I understand it too. Just with Westbrook, and then when it comes to consumer goods, I understand like merchandise, the merchandise opportunities when it came to the Fresh Prince logo and what have you. But I think to your point, the product needs to be great, right? And obviously, like maybe it shouldn't be like talent led for the product to be great. Find like a great operator, or someone that actually can build an incredible product, right? That's what Jay-Z was attracted to with the cognac, right? And the champagne. So, how, for example, coffee? How did you all go about doing coffee, and why did you see that there's an opportunity, for example, within coffee?
Yeah, at that point in time, and it's a project. I don't even know if it'll great project, and they may still release it. But at some point, I think it was authentic because people didn't realize how much of a coffee, I can't even say coffee lover, like coffee fanatic Will is, and so that was the through line there, right? And so we didn't end up releasing it in the time that I was there, and I think it's still something that they have up their sleeve potentially, but the opportunity to storytell around Will's fascination and fanaticism and love for coffee, partnered with his own, as we said, authentic signature blend that was kind of like tailored to his palate. That was an ultimate goal for us, right? And so we always went around like, what is authentic, and so for him, it was coffee of all things, right? Like to understand like his love, his fanaticism, the obscene number of cups that he drinks a day, among other things. That was a big part for us and why we went with coffee.
Got it. So what led, and I know you had a stint at Raptive, but what led you to founding your own VC firm, Freedom Trail Capital? What was like the impetus behind it?
Yeah, you know what? It's more opportunistic than anything. Like I had worked with and experienced success like as an operator in these talent-led brands. And so what I wanted to do was, and also like just seeing or at least trying to skate to where the puck is going in terms of the consumer space and the fact that like talent-led brands nowadays, and it's funny because I saw a quote from Mark Andreessen recently where he's talking about like talent-led brands and celebrity-led brands are probably the future of consumer. Seeing like the success that we had there and wanting to at least be involved there, right? So I had a couple of deals that someone I knew had brought to my table. I'd always had deal flow just by being in Jay's orbit and Will's orbit and being in LA, like you just always have deal flow. And a couple came through that we didn't even end up pulling the trigger on, but a couple came through that were good enough where I was like, hey, I could spin up an SPV just to do these and try to raise capital. Or I can do a fund where I can try to find multiple opportunities like this that I have access to that other people don't typically have access to, right? Whether it's talent-led deals or whether it's like deals that could be good for talent, where I can bring it to contacts that I have and then try to bring talent aboard after the fact, which is something that we do as a fund as well. And so it was really like seeing these deals where I was like, this is cool, but it seems like, there are consumer funds. There are even like a couple of celebrity funds nowadays, but there aren't many that A, are founded by operators who have like operated and built these businesses. B, are taking advantage of the arbitrage opportunity around like, this is a great company that could be authentic for this talent partner. Let's bring that person in and see if we can supercharge it. And then C, I also wanted to kind of like look for brands that sat at the intersection of culture, lifestyle, and influence. And so, but a lot of it was just leaning on, these couple of deals that, again, we didn't end up doing, but a couple of deals where I was like, these are great. And I think there's a market here to be served. And also consumer in general, not just CPG, but like consumer in general. There's a value add that talent and only talent can bring to the table. And Ryan Reynolds, like at the time, it also helped that Ryan Reynolds had won with Aviation Gin, and then he won with Mint Mobile. And then now he's got this fintech thing we're doing, but he also has his marketing company where people are seeing like the value of talent if utilized correctly. That was kind of the sweet spot that I wanted to serve, but it was more opportunistic than anything. I have a few consulting clients now, and after leaving Westbrook and then spending some time at Raptive, I work with talent nowadays who are very entrepreneurial, right? And they're like, help me get some structure, help me think through how I can build this thing. I have this idea, I have this product, how do I make it a business? And then on the investing side, we're looking for like really great run businesses that can utilize talent or are utilizing talent and can do so better. And so that a little bit of arbitrage opportunity that we can leverage as a fund as well.
I feel like now there are a lot of talent-led brands, and there's a lot of talent associated with brands. It's and some of them have done well, some of them have done poorly. In your mind, what is that right balance? What actually needs to work? How are you kind of analyzing in terms of when talent and brand come together? When does it actually mesh to actually make something great? And as well as, is there particular categories that you think are ripe for talent, or categories that you think that actually talent is there's like so many talent-led brands, it's really saturated. Does it make sense to like launch another brand in like this space, for example?
Yeah, so I don't think it's saturated. I don't think it can get saturated. And the reason I think that is like at some point the reason it works is because it's has to be, and talk about why it works for Jay, right? Like it's got to be authentic, right? And so at some point, not just authentic, but it's got to, you have to have a quality bit. Like if you don't have a great business, the thing just isn't going to work. It's not going to take off no matter what. If you have a great product, Travis Scott and Cacti, right? Like Travis Scott's top of the world. You got Budweiser. I think Budweiser was behind Cacti. They released this hard seltzer thing. It's everywhere. It's going like gangbusters. And the thing doesn't taste good. It's not a good product, right? It's not going to go. And so when we as a fund do our due diligence, and in general, when I think these things actually work, is when you have a great product that it has a reason to exist, is differentiating in the marketplace in some way. When you have a quality brand, right? Like it's not just about like, I got a product and I slap someone's name on it, but when you actually put some thought into brand story, brand architecture, brand equity, those things we talked about before, when you can actually cultivate a community, when you have a founding and executive team or an operational partner that knows how to run these things and operate and be efficient, and then your last consideration is the talent and how you leverage that talent, that's where it can be successful. And then on top of that, in order for it to be successful, it's got to be authentic. Right. So like if the product is great and the brand is good and the operating team or the executive team is excellent and they can run an efficient business, and then you're utilizing talent appropriately, not to like build the brand, but to tell the story of the brand in a way that's authentic, then you can actually win. Right. And so at some places, if you've got consumers that are like, I'm not buying it, that sounds like BS. Or in some places, if you've got people who are like, that seems fake, like, like I'm not going to point any fingers, but you have alcohol brands founded by people who don't drink, or are struggling with sobriety, or things like that. I think you're going to struggle, right? And so you still have to have a great product. It's not just about slapping a name on it. You still have to have a quality business. You still have to have great distribution. You still have to have great margins. You still, like, all those things that make good businesses are a necessity. And then you have to have talent that can authentically tell the story of why they're involved. It's not just like, oh, it's a money grab. It's like, no, I think that talent partner needs to make sense for whatever the brand or the product of the company is, where it's a believable story that you're telling. Now you can do something, right? And what you can do is connect that talent's following to the consumer for that product. The product can like use the celebrity as a proxy for making their own decision, and we do it all. It's why we've been like endorsements have always been a thing. It's all you have celebrity endorse. It just so happens that nowadays celebrities are more entrepreneurial, so they're taking a piece of the company. Like, so when Beyonce says "pay me in equity," it's still, you've always had endorsers and you've always had endorsements for a long, long time. It's just a new model to it, right? And so now the other thing is like, us as a fund, we're category agnostic within consumer. So I tell people like, we do CPG, of course, but consumer tech, consumer AI, SaaS, all those things. And again, I don't think there's a limit on where talent can be successful, as long as it's authentic and it makes sense and it's a believable story, right? So if you told me, I don't know, like if Kim Kardashian had a Shopify competitor, and she was like, I started this company because we were running Skims, and Skims weren't working X, Y, and Z. So we started this company, and I use this Shopify, whatever it is, for all of my companies, all my inventory. And that's why I started it. It's believable, right? And so at some point you get the authenticity behind it. And so I think it's also very much about storytelling, right? It's got to be woven into the story of the brand and the company in a way that is authentic, not just believable, not just like, if you tell it, will people believe it? Can you trick them into believing it? It's got to actually feel authentic. But yeah, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, again, Ryan Reynolds with Mint Mobile, right? Like, people are like, oh, it's a cell phone company. But he was able to weave in his reason for being involved there, his value add for Mint Mobile, why Mint Mobile was competitive, and actually take that from where it was when he got involved to new heights. He's trying his hand again with this fintech company he's invested in. And for that reason, again, like we said, like, use talent to be top of the sales funnel. When you get people in that sales funnel, is it believable? Is it authentic? Do they have a reason for being like, cool, this makes sense, let me find out more? When you get them to find out more, the product has to be great, the brand has to be great, it's got to connect with people, it's got to be sticky and all those things still. It can't just be about, like, again, like a Cacti, for example, like Travis, that thing, it blew the doors off of places when it like started, right? It was everywhere and everyone tried it. Then they drank it and they're like, this is not very good. And so then you're in trouble. Then you're in trouble, right? And so it's all, you gotta run a good business. You gotta have a good product, and then you gotta use talent appropriately.
Yeah, well, I was just trying to think, because I think that's a really interesting kind of thesis that you have, and that not just consumer goods, but also, you know, consumer tech and consumer AI companies. I'm trying to think if there has been like examples of like a consumer tech company that as a successful consumer tech company that had that was talent led. Um, I'm just trying to think, because Tidal wasn't really like a success from like that capacity. Just trying to think of like a Tidal. Like Tidal wasn't so much like a success from like that, from like in like that kind of way.
Yeah, not in that way, but you know, I mean, judging from the exit they had, it's successful. It's a success to somebody, right? But yeah, but it's but you're right. Tidal's probably a good example, right? At some point, and I don't think it achieves the heights that even Jay wanted to, especially like where Spotify and Apple Music are. But for him, like, to tell the story of like, it's artist led, it's artist founded. I created this because I wanted a platform that I could have utilized, and so on and so forth. Again, I guess Mint Mobile is quasi CPG, quasi tech.
I was thinking about Mint. If Mint would kind of qualify for that.
And you'll get some, I think, very soon, especially in the AI space, you'll get some creatives who are going to be like, I use this to create whatever content, blah, blah. And like, you're going to get to, and I've seen it from us, like I've seen a few of those come through that I think I have a very good sense are going to be very successful in the not too distant future. So those are big ones, but it's got to be believable and authentic. And nowadays with this creator economy, you'll get folks who are like, yeah, it's a tech thing, but I use it to do X, Y, and Z. And I think from a consumer standpoint, people are going to actually welcome that and actually listen. Like if Mr. Beast was like, I edit all of my YouTube videos with this AI thing, the thing's going to go crazy. Like let's be honest, right? And so at some point, it's got to be right person, right story, right product, right company, and it'll go. And that's why for us, we're not just like, it's just CPG. It's, yeah, those, the talent that can like lift in a consumer tech brand might be few and far between, but they're out there. It just has to be right brand, right company, right talent, right product, all of those things. But you can get it to go.
Yeah, no, it's a great, it is a great point. It is like, just like thinking back through, totally understand like the use case, certainly when it comes to creators, and that, I mean, that Mr. Beast example that you said, I use like this program to like edit like all my videos, like 100% could see that, maybe doing quite well if obviously like the technology is that good, and people actually want to purchase again and again and again.
You gotta have a great product, right? That's really like that's what matters. In that case, maybe you might like, maybe the software, the AI serves on a per edit. You can do like a monthly subscription, or you can do like a per edited video. I don't know, so something to that effect. But to your point, it has to be that good. Or if Steve Aoki or DJ Jazzy Jeff had like a DJing software, right? Like those are like, eventually you'll get like a software thing where someone like that, Calvin Harris, like I use, like back in the days when Fruity Loops came out, if Fruity Loops, like the actual like editing software was a thing, you know what I mean? Like a producer, like nowadays you have like star producers could be like, I edit on this software, and you know what I mean? So I do think, and that's why we're category agnostic. I think celebrity tequila is overdone, but someone could prove, because you asked about like categories that I think are too saturated. I'm over tequila, but that's just me. And then who knows? Like if there's an innovation in the tequila space that someone can come out with, then more power to them. I think it's just tequila, like Reposado, Añejo from a celebrity. I think that is overdone for sure.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, Samyr is not investing in tequila anytime soon, it seems.
But there are other agave-based spirits that I've heard of and seen, like a mezcal and a few others.
I do think, like, going back, I love this idea of like the consumer tech question too. Like, it is quite interesting how in the music space you had Jay-Z and Tidal, you had Neil Young creating like his own music player. I remember that. I think it was called like Lalo or something like that. I remember him going on I think it was David Letterman and like talking about it back in the day. But it is interesting how like the winner turned out not to be some a company that had that kind of like talent led, which is just quite interesting, because you would have thought that these like big musical figures, obviously, that it would be maybe come from that the technology would be, they'd be kind of part of that technology moving forward. So that is quite interesting. How do you diligence like the actual company itself? Because I mean, obviously you understand like the talent side, and of course you have like the operations experience from yourself. But like, in your mind, how do you truly find like, okay, this is truly a great product, and I now want to supercharge it with trying to maybe bring talent involved, or if talent's involved, like I want to be part of that. But how do you actually diligence like the product itself, whether it's a brand, whether it's a piece of technology?
Yep. Yeah. I think twofold. I think I look at it from an operational standpoint. Like when you unpack the business, it's like, what's the P&L look like? What's the balance sheet look like? What are the margins? How are you operating? So on and so forth. That's like your typical, it's got to be a good business. But then it's also anecdotally, right? Like at some point, how do retailers feel about it? Are you growing in distribution? Are you growing in door count if it is a product? What's the community feel about it? Like, what are people saying about it? Are you growing? Is there some sort of velocity in terms of how people are adopting it or growing it? And then it's also subjective too, right? At some point, it's like, not only have I tried it, but have other people in the orbit tried it? What do surveys say? What's the NPR? What's the Net Promoter Score? What are those things that I think people use to kind of get a sense when you're doing like community listening, right? Like, what are people saying? What's this? And it's also the same reason I know, like, talk to people and they look at Cacti and like, it didn't taste good. That's an issue. So at some point you want to know, what's the community saying on social? What's the Net Promoter Score? What are the retailers saying? What are buyers? Because at some point when you look at like Nielsen ratings, is it moving off the shelves? How is it moving off the shelves? What does Walmart say about it? What does Whole Foods say about it? And all those things, right? So a lot of it is like in diligence. It is the objective piece of, is this a quality business? How are the margins? Can we improve margins? Can we help? It's a subjective piece of like, what are people saying about it? And then when I ask what people are saying about it, I'm curious about like retailers and distributors and also the consumer as well, right? Like, so you've got to do a lot of like consumer and community listening to understand, like, do people like it? Do people like, and also that means like, I might not like it. It might not be for me, but do people like it as a whole and both objectively and broadly, right? Because no, there's no one thing that's for everybody, but as broadly as possible, are people liking whatever it is? And then again, like talking to retailers and looking at Nielsen numbers and looking at all of those things that can let you know like this thing is growing and it's bubbling and people like it and they want more of it. Or if it's like it stays on shelves and your store velocity is super low and it's shrinking and blah blah blah, all of that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, do people, once they buy it, is there like repeat rates? Are people coming back for more, and what have you? So that it makes total sense.
And then you ask, and only because you're asking the tech side, it's not as simple as like looking at Nielsen and like store data and all that stuff. But the other piece of it is like, what's the email list look like? What do socials look like? And then I'm going through comments in socials, right? Do people like it? Do they use it? What do they talk about? What are they complaining about? Are they subscribing to it? What do the blogs look like? What's Reddit saying? What are the communities saying? What's Discord saying? All of those things kind of add up to make a big difference if you're actually like paying attention. And then as an investor, you got to pay attention, but also as an operator, you have to pay attention too, right? At some point, if there are enough people on a Reddit board saying like this part of this app stinks and I hate it, you got to listen. You got to listen. It's how you improve. It's how you get better. It doesn't mean you listen to everything. It doesn't mean that everybody has a point. But if it's loud enough, you have to understand like people hate this product. They like this product. They like it except for this one thing or whatever it is. This solves a real problem for them from a tech standpoint. Like, does this app solve a problem for them? Had they been waiting for it and so on and so forth? All of that makes a huge difference.
Samyr, I feel like I feel like this interview could have lasted honestly like another hour. It was so much fun talking with you. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And there you have it. It was a pleasure chatting with Samyr. Samyr, thanks again so much for coming on the podcast. If you're enjoying the show, highly recommend checking out consumervc.com and subscribing to the newsletter. You'll receive all new fundraising updates that's happening in the world of consumer, and as well as you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. Thank you again to Propeller Industries for being our sponsor. Thanks for listening.